We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And today we have a special podcast. We're doing an interview with Charlie Jones, who is the regional sales manager for SurgeX. That is a power protection company, part of Amatech. And we're excited to talk to him today. I'm noticing that I put on, I think, the same shirt, but I have cut my hair. So this is going to look like a very strange edit when we go into the interview.
I don't remember if I think I got a haircut after the podcast too. Maybe we both have different hair.
Different shirt. You have a different shirt.
I definitely have a different shirt on because I could never keep track of such things. So this is AVRant. We are a podcast that answers home theater and AV questions. Whose questions? Your questions. If you want your question answered by us, experts in the field. I have 10 plus years experience in AV, worked for one of the largest AV website in the world for 8 years. Have done interviews, I've done CEDIA, I've done tech reports, I've done editorials, the whole 9 yards. I've been in and out of this business just about every way you can be other than to actually install anything for money. I've done it for free, but not for money. Rob, of course, is an expert in all things geek. It's because his mind is like a steel trap. He remembers everything. So when we need model numbers and we need specs and things, Rob's our go-to guy. So between the two of us, we're able to pretty much answer any question you may have about home theater. We're very rarely stumped. Can we think of? I think Bill's one stumper we've had.
That's right.
But
yes. He even got the nickname.
We got the nickname the Stumper because he stumped us one time. But most of the stuff we can answer. So if you want your question answered, you ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. This week, or this podcast, we're going to be talking with Charlie Jones. We don't do a lot of interviews, but we were very interested because we had a lot of listeners who had questions about surge protection. Not just surge protection, but voltage regulation, UPS, uninterruptible power supplies, whether or not all this stuff was necessary, or snake oil, and who the heck is SurgeX, since it's a company that we're not super familiar with. So we're very happy to present you now with our interview with Charlie Jones.
Welcome to AVRant, Charlie.
Good morning. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of requests from listeners over the years. This podcast has been going for over 10 years now, about power protection and the best uses of it, why we need it, why we might not need it, what all the different functionalities that people tout out there. So we're hoping today we're going to get some of those questions answered, not just from our own research, but also from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So, Charlie, if we just jump right into it, let's just talk a little bit about what SurgeX. Not all of our listeners have heard of you guys, so why don't you give us a little brief introduction of your company?
Absolutely, yeah. I got to be honest, with a name like SurgeX, we've been accused of selling many things, some that enhance performance outside of the AV space, but I assure you that we are a power protection company, been around about 30 years now. Like a lot of American entrepreneur stories, we started at a guy's garage in Pennsylvania. But that was many years ago. We were then acquired by a company called ESP that does surge protection for imaging spaces. And then about a year ago, ESP SurgeX was acquired by Amatech, which is about a $4 billion conglomerate in various different power industries, which has been pretty cool because now we've got access to some big boy toys.
Nice.
And how about yourself, Charlie, just so folks understand a little bit more about your expertise? How long have you worked at SurgeX, and what does your position at the company entail?
Absolutely. So my current role with SurgeX is a regional sales manager for our commercial products. So on my day-to-day, I handle our rep network, which calls on primarily commercial audio-video integrators that install systems in churches and arenas and stadiums and higher education all over North America. That being said, my roots are actually in the residential home theater AV space. I started out many years ago thinking, hey, that's cool, and being the AV guy at the high school pushing around the cart that everybody loved to see because it meant it was movie day. And so I managed to bluff or BS my way into getting hired at one of the audio companies. There was a whopping 2 of them in Savannah, Georgia at the time in the mid-90s, to help work on the install crews. Of course, this was back when the peak of video performance was S-Video. Laserdisc was all the rage. If you wanted it brighter, well, then that meant we double stacked some CRTs and then spent the next 12 hours trying to keep our eyes from crossing as we double stacked those bad boys. Yeah, not to sound like, the old guy, kids get off my lawn, but it's like, you don't realize how easy you got it. Just take the projector out of the box, you throw it on the ceiling. We had to get those things within like 3 inches of distance because there was no adjustment. So
yeah, anyway. With your single chip DLP, a little bit easier, isn't it, for the convergence?
That's exactly it. So over the years, though, I've worked. This is actually my second foray with SurgeX, and in between, I actually worked for Sennheiser, the German microphone company. And so while my day-to-day focus is mostly on commercial audio and video, my roots are very much in the residential AV space.
Yeah, our questions on this podcast have seriously degraded over the years as far as video calibration. It used to be, half the questions would be how to calibrate our video. These days, we don't get those, I don't think, anymore, hardly, maybe once every couple of weeks. But let's start with a brief overarching sort of explanation. Why do we need power protection products? What problems can be caused by power coming from our wall outlets?
Absolutely, and it's funny because it actually ties in with what you were just saying. As everything has moved to being microprocessor based, on the one hand, when it works, it's a hell of a lot simpler, right? It's easy to use. We take it out of the box, we hit the button, we turn it on, we're ready to rock. The downside is with anything digital now, the little different gremlins, as it were, are much harder to chase out. We have these phantom lockup issues. We have situations where I don't know what's going on. It was working just fine. Now it doesn't work. I unplugged it from the wall. I waited 30 seconds, plugged it back in, and magically it works again. And so really the whole power protection side has become more important as equipment has moved over into the digital realm. When people think power protection, to be honest, they tend to think, good, Old Testament Bible, acts of God, lightning from the skies, Zeus, the whole 9 yards, which, lightning is very much something that if you live in Florida, for example, very big concern. However, if you live outside of British Columbia, not necessarily as big of a deal. However, surges can still affect you negatively. Florida Power and Light, which is the big power company down in Florida, actually did a study and realized that 80% of power disturbances come from within the building. We think surges, we think lightning from the outside. Truth is, 80% of the problems that are causing your guys headaches with their home theater setups are coming from within their own house. Now, the question is always, all right, well, where's this stuff coming from? Well, it's really anything with a motor. So your air conditioning compressor, your refrigerator, your wine cellar, even the garage door motor. Every time these things cycle on and off, they generate what's called a common mode surge. Now, don't think that this is a surge that's going to kill you. It's not going to blow up anything. It's part of the way the stupid laws of physics work, right? Remember in high school, we kind of have to all follow by them whether we agree with them or not. And so the problem is that all of our digital devices, it's all ones and zeros, right? And they depend on a clean ground reference for figuring out what's zero supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Basically, your device turns on, it checks ground and says, okay, whatever voltage I see at ground, we're going to say that is zero. And anything above that, we'll consider a one. Well, if at the same time that it's checking is the same time that your air conditioner is turning off, there may be 100 volts on the ground momentarily. Well, now 0 is 100 and nothing got higher than that, so I don't know what to do. It locks up. Your technician goes out, he unplugs the gear, he waits 30 seconds, he plugs it back in. I don't know what's wrong. Everything works just fine. Because of the odds of him plugging it back in at the exact same time that the air conditioner turns off again are pretty slim to none. So it's all of these little verities that happen within the structure that really cause a lot of your headaches and hiccups and issues. They're still technically considered a surge, but for most of your listeners, I'm sure that when they think surge, they think lightning. And so we're trying to get past that. Let's talk about the common mode surges and the little surges that are within the facility.
Right. It really is. I mean, I guess you could call it's not a technical term, but it's a small surge. It's a little blip in the power. It's not a failure event. It's not a blow your fuse event, right? It's something much, much, much smaller that honestly, unless you happen to catch it at that exact moment, you're not even going to notice that it occurred, right?
Yep. And that's exactly it. People, the reason why it's frustrating to troubleshoot these locked up gear issues is it doesn't happen every time. If it happens every time, that's easy. It's a failing piece of equipment. But it's why is it that once a month I have to reboot my cable box?
So before we dig into some more of the technical side and specific products in that, I wanted to touch on safety because you think power, that's really important to have safety. And so one of the things we always tell people to look for on this podcast is UL certification, Underwriter Laboratories certification. So could you just explain to our listeners why that's important? What does it provide to customers in terms of assurance? And what does it not tell customers about a power protection product? Because it's not necessarily telling you all the features of what it does. It's just a sticker. So what's going on with UL?
Yeah. And in like a lot of companies these days, the Underwriters Laboratory, which makes sense to a lot of us, has rebranded. So now they're just UL, which at least they didn't go to like a squiggly symbol thing like Prince did a few years back. But everybody wants to rebrand. I'm thinking about changing my name to something, sexier. Can't hurt. So Underwriters Laboratory is a private for-profit company that conducts safety tests of electrical equipment. I always point that out because some people think that it's sort of a pseudo-government agency. Underwriters Laboratory, or I'm sorry, UL as they like to be called now, is not a government agency. It is recognized by by OSHA, the Office of Safety and Health Administration, as one of 19 different laboratories that can test and verify the safety of electrical equipment. So UL is not the only one. A lot of times you'll see TUV or you'll see ETL. These are all other labs that do testing. The important thing is that for any of these to be certified by any of these 19 different labs, it has to meet a certain standard. The standard that has been adopted that applies to surge protection devices is what's called UL 1449. It's actually on its third revision. And basically the idea was, let's establish a general baseline that we can say that if it says that it's a surge suppressor, it meets this bare minimum requirement. So what are those requirements? To be UL 1449 certified as a surge protection device, the unit has to withstand a surge of 6,000 volts, 3,000 amps, and not let through more than 330 volts of that.
Okay.
So two questions always come up. One, why 6,000 volts, 3,000 amps? Lightning can be much, much, much bigger than that. Well, basically, the UL 1449 is concerned with the amount of surge that can come through the wiring. To be honest, when you get above 6,000 volts, 3,000 amps, the wiring tends to melt into a puddle of molten copper, and there's a fire. Still definitely a problem. However, at that point, it's no longer a electrical surge problem. It's more of a call the fire department to bring hoses type.
That's a catastrophic power event right there.
Correct. So 1449 in all surge protection devices, they're concerned about how much surge energy can actually get through the wiring. So your customers that are thinking, man, I bought this magic box that if lightning hits my house, I'm protected. Yeah, not so much. The other flip side of that is that to meet UL 1449, the box itself can let through up to 330 volts. Now, your normal household wall outlet, most of your gear that's in your AV equipment, right, is expecting 120 volts. 150 usually is kind of the maximum. So as you can see, even if a 1449, a UL approved surge suppressor is doing its job, it still can let through enough voltage to damage your equipment. So the key with UL 1449 is it's there to keep you safe, your kids safe, your dog, your canary, whatever. It's not there to necessarily protect your gear. So UL listing, while it's an awesome thing, and yes, you definitely need to make sure that your products that you're using are listed with one of the testing labs, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to protect your equipment. It just means that your equipment's not going to kill you.
Yeah, and we should just briefly mention that pretty much applies to the United States, and in other countries and around the world, they might have their own certification bodies as well. So we're not going to dig into that, but just so folks know that whatever country you're living in, if you're outside the United States, you might have an actual government body that certifies those things. So still important to look for that certification from a personal safety standpoint. It's not nothing, but as you explained,
the other labs that are doing certification as well as the ones that you mentioned, so there's like 19 of them, is UL the UL 1449, is that universal, or is that they each have their own standard that they grade to?
Great question. So UL 1449 was adopted by ANSI, ANSI, the big global standards organization. So at that point, you're right, Tom. It went from being a UL specific standard to being a global standard. Okay. So it has been accepted, and so any of the laboratories, any of the other 19 laboratories worldwide, those are all certifying to what is now an ANSI standard. It just, for parlance, we all call it UL 1449 because that's where it started. It's actually on its third revision, which made it a lot harder than the first two revisions. But great point in that it is now a global standard.
So, a potential customer, one of our listeners, how can they determine what sort of power problems they might have, or what sort of power protection might benefit them most? I mean, if 1449 is going to protect them, what are they looking for to make sure that their gear is also protected? Because that's what a lot of people are buying these products for.
Sure. And it's power is funny. It's one of those things that it's very much back to our friend, the laws of physics. It is science. However, somewhere between when we all quit paying attention in science class in high school and what comes out of your wall, what should be scientific fact gets interwoven with a little bit of voodoo black magic. And the problem is some of the electricians that, the guy down the street, they sometimes contribute to this. And so, part of the problem is that the same power that's causing your surround receiver to lock up will power your lights all day long without a hint or a flicker. And so one of the things that's very frustrating for your listeners, frustrating for a lot of our customers, you guys might have dealt with it yourself, is, well, everything else seems to be working fine, but why does my media server lock up all the time? And so we call, if we eventually figure out, okay, maybe we've got a power problem, we call an electrician out. They come out, really, your average Joe Schmo electrician is checking some pretty basic stuff. The voltage that's coming in from the utility grid, maybe the amperage that your gear is pulling, or the wattage. And that's because to get to power analytics, to be able to really analyze the power, historically has meant that you've needed some pretty sophisticated and read as expensive gear. Companies like Fluke or Siemens, they make power analytic meters that are a couple thousands of dollars. And even if you bought one, that's only half the battle, because then you pretty much need to be an electrical engineer to decipher what's coming out the other side, the data, the analytics. So we got a lot of those same requests from customers saying, guys, is there some way that I can tell, do I even have a power issue? And so we actually recently launched a line of products called Envision that are not, they're not surge protectors. They're not going to save your gear. It's basically a little black box, though, that we plug in ideally between the wall and our rack, and it logs everything that's happening power-wise. So the incoming voltage, the power factor, crest factor, the amperage, it'll even measure the amount of common mode noise. Remember earlier we were talking about some of our phantom lockups that come from motors turning on and off. Well, when that voltage gets too high, that's what really manifests itself in some of these weird lockup situations. So this little Envision box not only records all this data, but it logs it with date and time stamps so that we can go back and say, you know what, the system locked up yesterday at 10 p.m. Well, let's see what was going on at 10 p.m. Well, hell, at 10 p.m., maybe it was a brownout situation. We weren't getting all the power that frankly we paid for from the utility, or maybe we were having some common mode noise issues. So that then your listeners can figure out, okay, where do I really need to spend my money to address the problem versus just throwing money out the window hoping that this fixes my issue.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to our listeners, like, I wouldn't say that a product like that is for absolutely everybody out there who's just, buying a TV from Best Buy, plugging it in, and that's their entire system, and they just want to watch TV. It's probably a little bit of overkill, but we have people who are digging into Room EQ Wizard and measuring every single seat in their theater and every single speaker and, really getting into the nitty-gritty. So that suits that type of person. Do you have a ballpark price point on those Envision products, just so people have a rough idea what they'd be investing to do something like that?
Yeah, I think retail on those is, I want to say, right around $400.
Okay.
Yeah, so and that's something also that we would recommend, maybe, contacting your local AV dealer, and perhaps, he'll loan it to you for a week or 2 weeks, because it's not something that a lot of our dealers buy it as a diagnostic tool, just as your listeners are interested in diagnosing problems. And so it's not something that necessarily you need to have permanently installed. If we're trying to trace out an issue, maybe one of your guys can borrow one, get the guy that's cutting him a deal on that new Blu-ray player to let him figure out, analyze his power for a month, and see what's going on. So because we really realize this is something a little bit different than other things that have historically been on the market. And so we definitely be happy to also help your listeners figure out, who's somebody that's got one local, so that maybe they can figure out what's going on.
Very cool. Well, let's say someone is on board, they've either done the testing and they've found some power problems, or they just want to have the peace of mind that they've got their gear protected. We are focused mostly on home theater here. I know you're saying, right now you're focusing on commercial professionally, but the home theater side of it. So we want to ask, SurgeX has a large lineup of products, but some of them, just going through the website, you can see are even named home theater, or they're under the residential section of the website. But what are some of the specific models that you would point to that are really well suited for home theater, and what are the features of those models that make them suited to home theater, that they're good for that application?
Absolutely, yeah. So the cool thing about SurgeX that is very much different from a lot of the other guys is that our core technology, what we call our surge reactor, in reality it's two opposingly wound air core inductors. Basically, we convert surge energy into heat. The vast majority of other products on the market use what are called shunt mode devices, which are officially called a metal oxide varistor, or an MOV. And basically, the way those work is that when it detects a surge, the surge energy is dumped onto the neutral or the ground, depending on which brand that you're using. Which, again, from a life safety standpoint, totally fine. The problem is, now that we're dumping more voltage onto our ground, if you think back to earlier, well, now we're back to causing those ground contamination issues. And so SurgeX does not use metal oxide varistors in any of our SurgeX products. So that when our units handle surge energy, it's converted into heat. It's not dumped to the neutral or the ground. So the cool thing is, when you're trying to figure out, all right, what is the best SurgeX product for my application, you don't have to worry about, well, does this one have the good, better, or best levels of protection? All SurgeX frankly has is heavy, heavy protection. Our air core inductors, unfortunately, have a little bit of weight to them. So the cool thing is we don't have to worry about, am I getting the best level of protection? It really comes down to what features do I need. And so for your basic, I've got my AV, equipment rack, and I just want a rack mount unit. That's where the XR315 is a great unit. It's got the SurgeX protection. It also has EMI and RFI noise filtration, as well as what we call our codes, which is catastrophic over/under voltage shutdown. Somebody was really working hard that day on acronyms. But the cool thing about codes is that it detects an over or under voltage situation, not a surge, but just high voltage or lower voltage than it should. It will automatically disconnect your connected equipment until the power event passes, and then automatically reconnect it back. So where this really comes in is, let's say that the electrician or the power company lineman is working on the transformer down the street. He's not paying attention. He takes off the neutral for a split second while he's changing things over. Well, now your outlet that's supposed to have 120 volts now has 240 volts. Mm-hmm. That is not technically a surge. Your oven uses 240 volts. Your dryer uses 240 volts. That's not a surge. So your equipment, whether it's SurgeX, whether it's any other brand, it's not a surge. It's going to pass that through unless you have like the code circuitry. It reacts and sees that and goes, hold up for a second. You're not supposed to put more than 120 volts out of this. So it automatically disconnects your load to protect the equipment. So that's what we mean by like an over or under voltage event versus like a surge event. If we don't need a rack mount unit, or if we need a rack mount unit, but perhaps we want to take it to the next level, we want IP control or serial control. We want to tie it in with our control system, whether it's a RTI or Savant or AMX or Crestron or whichever one this week. That's where our Access Elite unit comes in. Again, a rack mount unit. Nice thing is individual outlet control, but now we also have the ability to monitor power down to the individual outlet level, which sometimes can be handy. We've had situations where guys have diagnosed that, hey, somebody needs to go clean out the filter on the projector because also the projector is drawing more and more juice, trying to overcome the fact that it can't breathe. Its power supply is sucking through that clogged up filter. The Access Elite also has a temperature probe, which can be nice because we can actually set up logic within the unit to say, hey, if my amplifier gets to be above 110 degrees, I want you to turn on these auxiliary rack fans to cool things down. Temperature gets back below, turn them back off because I don't want the extra noise. But one other product, SurgeX also makes a whole line of battery backup systems, UPSs, little bricks and strips, that kind of stuff. But the one other product that your listeners would probably be interested in is what we call our branch circuit solutions, which this is it looks like a little miniature electrical panel, and it actually gets wired between the breaker panel and all the outlets that are in the room, so that now we can protect every outlet and every device that's in your theater without needing to take up rack space or find a way to stick a little box between, let's say they're powered speakers, rather than having to have one for each of the 7 speakers plus the subwoofer. Well, we can just do this one little panel, and now no matter where we plug things around in the room, especially if you're the kind of guy that likes to buy and try out different equipment, no matter where you plug it in, it's going to be protected from surges and from noise and the other, inrush current issues like that.
So that's almost like its own little pony panel then.
It is. They call it the PF420 because it protects 4 20-amp circuits. So all in one little enclosure.
So most of what you've talked about has been rack mounted. Do you have any standalone units that people
we do. So that's where, and we it's funny you use the word standalone. Because all of our part numbers for our standalone products begin with SA, as in standalone. Okay. So we have a 15-amp version, a 20-amp version. We also have a 15-amp version that has 10 separate outlets, so that if we need to protect a lot of things, but we don't want to take up space in the rack. And one of the cool things about the SurgeX products, is that you can easily add additional power strips to those if you need to without causing any issues or any problems. The idea being like, let's say you've got a vertical strip in the back of your rack, you've got all your wires nice and neat. Well, in that case, let's put the SurgeX protection at the bottom, plug your strip into that, plug the SurgeX into the wall. Now everything in your rack is protected.
Okay.
So we're fans of battery backup or UPSs, uninterruptible power supplies, for our system, specifically for anything that has a fan or a hard drive. But if you've got a home theater PC or most commonly a projector, which you need it to be able to cool down, or you could risk your bulb, which might cost $300-400, exploding as your power goes out and it can't cool down and it just blows. So do you have any UPSs or battery backups that would be appropriate for the home theater use?
Absolutely. We actually have two different flavors of UPSs. And this is not unique to SurgeX, but the UPS battery backup technology kind of falls into two main broad categories. One is what's called a line interactive UPS. So with a line interactive UPS, which chances are right now, if you're thinking of the little small unit under your desk that begins with the letter A and ends in C, or maybe something that you tripped over on your way to the light switch. Those are all line interactive UPSs, meaning that the power goes out. Within a split second, it switches over to the internal battery and then continues to power your gear until the batteries die. Line interactive UPSs are great in that they're relatively compact, they're small in size, and they don't produce really much heat because really they're not doing anything until the power goes out. And so line interactive UPSs are fairly inexpensive, and they do a great job if we need to keep the power on if we need to keep the power flowing after the power goes out. So exactly to your point, Tom, we want to let the projector have its time to cool down, or perhaps we want to have the time to be able to initiate a proper shutdown sequence for like a computer or a media server. We also offer what we call online or dual conversion UPS units. Now, with these battery backups, your connected gear is always running off of the pure regenerated power coming out of the unit. So that regardless of what's happening on the input side, so whether you could be having a surge, you could be having a brownout, we could be having an overvoltage or anything in between, or maybe just a lot of noise from that your kids playing with the garage door trying to crush each other or something. The fact is that all this is going on the input side. Well, with an online or dual conversion UPS, because the signal is going AC power, DC conversion to the battery, to DC conversion back to AC power, you've established an isolation transformer so that now everything that's on your connected equipment side is seeing the pure 120 or 240 volts, depending on what you need, 60 hertz here in North America, or for international listeners, we have varying voltages as well. So the cool thing about your online units is now you've got not just the battery backup side, but we have in effect an isolation transformer that really helps clean up a lot of the noise. So there's zero switchover time because your gear is always running off the regenerated cycle. But the downside is that the units tend to be just a little bit larger. Still fits in, for SurgeX wise at least, they still fit into a 2U rack space, but they're a little bit deeper. Not IT rack, still fits in an AV rack. But for example, our line interactive units are about 10 inches deep, whereas our online units are about 16, 17 inches deep. Cool thing on those is you do have the ability to do hot swap the batteries. You've got the ability to add multiple battery packs if you want longer runtime. And then one thing also that I'll point out, because for any of your listeners that ever had the system go down at the total inappropriate time, with line interactive units and with most UPSs on the market, when the batteries die, batteries are they're almost kind of a living, breathing organism. They have a finite lifespan. They can only take so many charge and discharge cycles. With the vast majority of products on the market, when the batteries die, the unit itself stops passing power, meaning that your customer goes to go to fire up the rack. They've got 10,000 screaming kids at the house because it's Johnny's 12th birthday. promised them all they could play Xbox, and now nothing works because, oh crap, that's right, I was supposed to buy new batteries for the UPS. Well, with our online units, the great thing is that even if the batteries die, the units themselves will continue to pass power. Now, if power goes out, you're screwed, but at least everything will still stay on.
Will they function still as a surge protector and protect your gear, or are they just now basically passing power?
So it's still protecting everything. It's just you have no runtime if the incoming power goes out.
Sure. So how much would something like that run somebody?
The big thing on UPSs is it comes down to how long or how much gear do we need to run, and for how long do we need to run it. So for our online units, we offer 3 different flavors that we are just kind of normal off the shelf: a 1,000 watt unit, a 2,000 watt unit, and a 3,000 watt unit. The 1,000 is about $1,200 retail. The 2,000 is right around $2K, and the 3,000 is at like $2,500, give or take. And then, of course, you can add additional battery packs to those. For your customers, though, that want to take things to that whole other next level, one of the benefits of being owned by Amatec is that we have a sister company that does battery backups and battery protection for oil refineries, nuclear power plants, MRI machines. And so it was very interesting to me. I got the pleasure of attending the CEDIA trade show not too long ago in San Diego. And we actually sold a surprising number of what we call large format UPSs going into residential applications. Guys wanted to make sure that their theater system stayed up, that their entire home automation system stayed up, in some cases for hours, in some cases for days. But realistically, for a lot of them, it was, I want to just have everything up and running so that no matter how long it takes my generator to turn on, everything is still great. Nothing locks up between when the power goes out and the generator kicks on. I guess one of the problems of having your own compound is the power sometimes can be a little squirrely when you get to 12 miles from the nearest civilization.
So I'm going to venture into possibly the most uncomfortable question of the entire interview, but we've talked about these products. You've mentioned the differences in the way that SurgeX handles surges versus most of the other surge protectors that you're going to find out there, and we've mentioned some of the prices, and people are going to notice, okay, these prices, while not astronomical by any means, are a little bit higher than some of the other competing products that seem to offer similar features. Maybe they do it in a different technological way, but at least the marketing would say, okay, this is a similar feature. So it's sort of hey, you're a regional manager of sales, you know how to make this sale. The justification for spending the extra $100, or it might be an extra $1,000 in some cases, but our listeners are going to be looking for, well, what's the difference to justify that? If that makes sense, that's something to consider. But otherwise, why feature for feature is it not the same thing at a lower price?
Absolutely, and you're right. SurgeX. One of the things that we've never been accused of is being cheap. With our products, they do tend to be priced competitively, but a little bit on the high end compared to some of the other products. And I think part of that comes from the fact that we still manufacture our products here in the good old USA, right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I highly encourage any of your listeners, if you're ever in the area, let us know. Be more than happy to throw a hard hat on you and give you a tour. But the key fundamental differences come down to, one is how our equipment is designed. While we have a number of great products that work fantastic in the home theater market, to be honest, our design philosophy, first and foremost, is looking at those mission-critical applications. We're designing our products for the NASA's, the Pentagon's, the National Institute of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the Yankee Stadium, which some of you right now are happy that it's vacant at the moment. But the Dallas Cowboys, AT&T Stadium, our core the bread and butter business is mission critical systems where downtime is not an option. And so one of the things that, with SurgeX is that it can't fail. And to that end, our products, because we don't use those metal oxide varistors, our products do not degrade over time. One of the hardest parts that I have as a sales guy is that, I'll go meet with a large, college that I know has a lot of SurgeX, and I see they're building a new building. And I'm like, oh, hey, this is great, guys. So, we're going to be doing some new SurgeX. And like, oh, well, no, we actually tore down an old building and we're buying all new projectors and whiteboards and everything else, but we know the SurgeX gear is fine, so we're just moving it over. So, one of the great things about SurgeX is we have a lifetime warranty on all of our gear. And so the biggest issue is that it doesn't degrade, it doesn't die over time. Does that cost more to build on the front side? Absolutely. But the fact that you're not having to replace it 2-3 years from now, we think that the cost amortizes out.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, a lot of times what our what our listeners will do, and I'm guilty of this myself, I need extra plugs. I've got a bunch of gear. I've got that I've just moved around. Could be a lot of times this happens with my computer. Like I get a computer, I'm like, oh, I've got 3 outlets, 4 outlets down there. That should be enough. And you realize it's not. You got a printer, you get scanner, you've got this, you got that. They just run to the store and they get themselves a $10 power surge protector outlet. Has a little button on it and everything. What's the problem with a device like that? Is it not going to protect my gear? And what would you suggest that people actually buy?
Great point. And the funny thing is, my own wife makes this same mistake all the time. Oh, hey, where's the surge protector? And I'm like, well, I've got some in my closet. And what she really means is she wants 6 outlets because 4 of the things she's trying to plug in have wall warts. Or the little brick transformers that cover up too many outlets. And so, one bit of distinction is that for a unit to be officially, legally a surge suppressor, then it has to meet at least the bare minimum UL 1449 that we were talking about previously. For your inexpensive products, for your $20 little trip light strip that you bought at Staples, what that means is it has 1 or 2 of those little metal oxide varistors in them, so that if it sees a surge, it's going to dump it over to neutral, of course, but the problem is letting through about 330 volts of that in the process. As we talked about earlier, this is actually causing us other issues because even if it doesn't blow up our printer, we just dumped a bunch of voltage onto the ground. So now, meanwhile, over in our home theater, honey, the kaleidoscope locked up again. What the hell? I thought you were going to have the guy take a look at it. Poor guy comes out, he unplugs it for 30 seconds, plugs back in, life's good. All because we spent $10 on a little power strip that's actually making problems worse rather than fix it. Now, that's not to be confused with the $2.99 Walmart special, which is really just a PDU, a power distribution unit. There's no surge protection of any sort in it. And at that point, really, it's just giving you more outlets. My way of looking at it is if it's not a mission critical, piece, you're better off just getting that Walmart strip because it's not going to be causing ground contamination issues further upstream down the line. A lot of things that have switch mode power supplies, they're more forgiving. They don't really care. Not to mention if it's something like, your toaster or whatever, which legally you should never plug into a power strip. But if you're going to do it, let's not use a surge suppressor because let's not cause more ground contamination issues that then we have to deal with and clean up further down the line.
That's an interesting take. Now, I wanted to go back at you. You mentioned that device that's a little bit like a pony panel, and so on the SurgeX website, there's also that's like a sidecar to the entire electrical panel. But those are not something that's like on the panel itself. This is, you have your electrical panel, and then this is a SurgeX device that protects many more outlets, sort of closer to the source, but it's still a separate device. But we've seen these whole house surge protectors that are like, it's a smaller device. It kind of looks like a big wall wart sometimes, sticking out the side of someone's panel, and they usually call it a whole house surge protector. So, how is that different from that Pony panel device that SurgeX offers, or what are those whole house surge protectors doing? Do you still need a device at each of individual electrical outlet if you have one of those? Just curious about those protections.
Sure. So the whole home surge protectors, which are very popular. The power company likes to sell them. Electricians like to sell them because it's kind of like it's a little bit like the rust proofing, or valve stem lube that you get on your car kind of thing. For them, it's gravy. They love it. And so what's really inside, like you said, it's just a small little box. And what's really inside there are the metal oxide varistors that we keep talking about. I've got one right here in my hand. And so what you look at is it looks kind of like a little pancake with two little legs. And so this actually sits between one leg goes on the hot and one leg goes on the neutral or the ground, depending on which technology they're using. And like we're talking about, when it detects a surge, it takes that surge energy, the little dielectric, shunts it over to the ground. The good news is that, if we've got a surge event that's going on down the street, this is great. We're going to dump it over the ground. We're not going to let it into the house. Two problems, though. One is that, again, every time this does that little shunting action, it degrades and dies a little bit on the inside. Kind of like that first job you had out of college, right? Every time you got up in the morning, you died a little on the inside, but you still did it. So eventually, though, when this finally dies, the unit continues to pass power, right? You still have power in your house because this just sits parallel to the incoming power. This is what SurgeX uses instead of the metal oxide varistor. The good news is, like we talked about earlier, is it doesn't degrade over time. It can take surge after surge after surge, converts it into heat rather than dumping it into the ground, causing ground contamination issues. The downside is our unit has to be in between the wall and your connected gear. All the power goes through the unit. And so we can easily do these for 15 amp circuits, 20 amp circuits, the normal stuff that you see in like a home theater environment. The problem is the incoming power in your house is more like 200 amps, 400 amps. And so frankly, you would need an inductor the size of, a small Volkswagen or, maybe, one of those giant Tesla panel kind of things, because we're not sitting parallel to the power. So long story short, the whole home surge protection, absolutely much, much better than having nothing at all. Just keep in mind, it's protecting you from surges that are coming in from down the street, from your neighbor's house, from lightning that hits the transformer on the pole a mile down the street. It's not doing anything at all to help with those common mode noise issues, those little internal surges that are generated within your house every time your elevator motor kicks on or your refrigerator does its thing. Right. Those are the problems that are causing your inconvenience lockups. The stuff down the street is what tends to blow stuff up. So again, not saying don't do it because it's definitely better than nothing, but just remember that that's basically giving you a firewall from the outside. It's not helping at all with anything that's on the inside.
And just for our audio-only listeners, I'll just describe the MOV, the metal oxide varistor. Looks like a little coin, basically.
It's a quarter size, yeah.
Yep, about size of a quarter.
Kind of like a coin, and then the inductor system that SurgeX is using looks like a kind of like a small computer power supply. I would say it's around like that. So just to give us an idea.
Yeah, I would encourage, if anybody's ever really interested to know what's really inside of an MOV, a metal oxide varistor, or versus our surge. If you ever get a chance at a lot of trade events or dealer open houses, we actually bring out one of our surge generators, because it's one thing to talk about, flux capacitance of this and that and the other. But what we like to do is bring out one of our surge generators, which generates the 6,000 volts, 3,000 amps that are dictated as part of the spec. And frankly, we blow stuff up. We plug in our stuff, we plug in competitor stuff, and we blast it, and we see what happens. And so it's always a great show, especially if you enjoy the smell of ozone in the morning. So definitely encourage you next time you get a chance to, if you're ever around like a dealer open house that's going to have SurgeX there, definitely check it out because it's a lot of fun blowing up electronics on purpose.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. By the way, yeah, you should need to post like a calendar on your website that tells us when that's going to
There
happen.
are, I'll say, and there are videos on YouTube if guys really want to check it out, where we've filmed it blowing up some competitive product.
That sounds awesome. Okay, so we've seen, and I've experienced this in the past. We've seen manuals for high power amplifiers and subwoofers in particular, in which the manufacturers pretty much universally say, don't plug them into any sort of power protection, plug them directly into the wall. We have fuses, we're fine. I've actually plugged in the subwoofer into a power conditioner, power, surge protector, all that stuff. That's a very high quality one, and it got in some sort of war with the amplifier. The amplifier was trying to draw power. The power conditioner was trying not to give it that much because it seemed like it was too much, and they went back and forth until it blew the fuse in the amplifier in the subwoofer. Plugging it directly into the wall stopped that from happening. What do you guys suggest for your products? Do you want to have things plugged directly into them no matter what, and you guarantee that you're not going to have this sort of issue that I'm describing or any others, or should you plug it directly into the wall as per the manufacturer?
It's a great question, and it's one that we get a lot. And frankly, I can't fault the amplifier and the manufacturers of these products, because on the power side, and especially coming from the residential side, I've seen it all. And frankly, there's some good products out there that are maybe based around outdated technology. There's other products that look really cool, but if you crack it open, you find out that they spent more of the budget on blue LEDs on the front than on any of the guts on the inside. And then there's other stuff that frankly, I think snake oil is the best way to describe it. The only thing that it's doing is just moving money from the customer to the sales guy's pocket. And that's where, one, we put a lot of time, money, and effort into doing real world testing, not hidden in labs, but so that anybody can see it. But then two, that's where we go back to UL 1449 and some of these different standards, because UL 1449 or some of the different surge protection standards is just a voluntary thing. You don't have to have that to be able to sell the product. And even if you do have 1449, it just means that it's going to be safe. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to pass current. So back to our poor guys, the amplifier designers and subwoofer manufacturers, all they know is that they want their product to perform the very best as possible, and that if it doesn't, people are going to blame them. They're not going to say on the internet, well, but in full disclosure, my 4,000 watt sub is plugged into this $2 power strip that I got at Wally World. Nobody brags about that part. And so that's where they're like, you know what? Because they don't know. Are you using snake oil? Are you using a good quality product? Are you using some crazy isolation transformer that, to be honest, cost more than my first apartment? You guys, your listeners fall into all those different categories. And so their default answer is, look, just plug it straight into the wall, because the big issue is current limiting. And depending on the different technology, what it really comes down to is the capacitors in the amplifier can't suck enough power out of your device to allow them to fully charge in time for the next time that the explosion happens, or the helicopter flies around the room, or the missiles launch, or whatever the case may be. And so they're very concerned about current limiting. All of the SurgeX products are designed to be so that they're not current limiting. You can pull, so for example, the 20 amp unit, you can pull full 20 amps of the current out of one outlet if that's what you want to do. Now, what some manufacturers do to try to keep certain amplifiers from tripping breakers and things, because if we plug two amplifiers into the same outlet and turn them on at the exact same time, maybe we've got like it all set up with the remote control setup. Well, now both of them are trying to charge their capacitors from empty at the exact same time. It trips the breaker. So some manufacturers, including SurgeX, implement what's called a soft start feature. The idea being that it keeps the amplifiers from triggering breakers. But amplifier manufacturers have gotten smart, and they've got their own soft start features. And so what we've seen, and you ran into it, it sounds like, Tom, the exact situation is our soft start fights with their soft start, which fights with our soft start, and nothing ever happens. And so what we've actually done to help that is you can actually turn off we call our soft start feature ICE, inrush current elimination. You can actually turn that off on our units so that it doesn't cause the situation that Tom ran into. So it comes down to do your homework. There's a reason why the amplifier guys are saying, you know what, don't plug into anything. And really it's because they don't want all the bad reviews that happen on the interwebs. But the truth of it is that you're definitely going to see a benefit if you're using the right protection and the right conditioning in front of it.
Okay, well, there you go. Plug an ICE amp into a ICE-protected SurgeX product, and you might want to turn off one of those ICEs.
That's exactly what it boils down to. And maybe have a drink on the rocks while you're doing it. And
that's right.
Ice, baby, we're covered.
Well, we are AVRant. We talk about home theater products. We'd be remiss if we didn't ask what Charlie has in his home theater. People always love to hear what equipment. We know that sometimes people who are affiliated with companies, you can't mention exact brands and model names or whatever like that, but just a rough idea of what sort of home theater you're enjoying when you're not talking to us and doing your work.
Sure. Well, guys, I have to be honest. As much as it pains me to tell you this, I'm a 2-channel guy. I own a television. It's by your listener standards, extremely unimpressive. It's like a 55-inch Sony LED with a Sonos sound bar and the sub. Because to be honest, I spend most of my life in hotels, and if the wife can't turn it on, it becomes a very long night for me in that hotel.
We completely understand. Yeah, that's a lot of our listeners too are in the exact same situation. We like recommending that stuff because it's convenient and it works and it sounds pretty darn good these days.
So. There you go. It's easy, but in my office for those times when I'm working on my TPS reports and preparing for my next podcast interviews, I do have a pair of the Neumann KH310D's studio monitors with their H10 subwoofer. Connected to a Class A CP800 that I, like a lot of your listeners, got from a guy that was upgrading to a Meridian this, that, the other, and I traded him like a kidney and a kid, and we worked it all out. But I've really been sold on Oppo, the disc players, and so I've currently got the BP103. BDP103 is kind of my main disc player that, to be honest, very rarely play discs these days. But I've been eyeing that the UDP 205. That thing looks like the cat's meow. So if I can somehow sneak it past the wife without her knowing, maybe it'll be a Christmas present myself. But we'll see. So yeah, the truth of it is, after spending a lot of time in the home theater market, really for me, it's all about music. And so, alas, pretty much even your lowest listener system blows the socks off mine. But it's all protected by SurgeX with IP control, so that if I do get that random locked up whatever, I can log into it from my phone, have it power cycle the unit, and my wife's happy. She's back to watching Twilight before I even get off the elevator at the random Hilton hotel.
Well, we better make it very clear. No apology necessary. We're always shocked at how many of our listeners write into us saying, oh yeah, they're going with 11 speakers and 4 subs and a full Atmos system. Because, I mean, Tom will admit, we didn't think Atmos was going to take off, like, at all. So
I'm still unconvinced that it has. But
well, wasn't there something before Atmos? There was a different one that had like height channels.
Oh, there was Neo X. I was all on board with 11 speakers before Atmos existed with DTS Neo X.
And the Yamahas had their presence channels forever.
That's right.
And then
neither of those really kind of went anywhere. So,
No.
And I don't think they have. I think that we are in the echo chamber because of our listeners calling with questions about systems that they have. We're like, wow, a lot of people have questions, therefore there must be a lot of people out there. I'm like, no. How many houses have you walked into that had more than 2 speakers? It's very rare. So is there anything we haven't covered today that you think that our listeners should know about?
I think at the end of the day, probably whether it's talking power, whether we're talking video, whether we're talking audio, I think a key thing to point out is to utilize resources like AVRant or some of the different message boards and things. Ask questions. I know as a manufacturer, I belong to a lot of the different little Facebook groups, and if I see something, I'm not going to get called drug into a flame war about the amount of flux capacitance or farads or whether or not there's no processed copper in our power cables that face east towards Mecca. If you use it on a Tuesday, whatever. I'm not getting into all that. But, people ask genuine questions. People have design considerations. Utilize a lot of those resources that are out there. We're happy to help. We want to kind of put to rest some of these bad rumors and craziness that people have dreamed up over the years. And so, it's easy. It's pretty easily, once you start looking at some of these guys, to figure out the quacks from the real guys. My thing is, whether it's AVRant, some of the other podcasts, some of the websites, utilize this stuff to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff. And, the fact is we live in a time where the technology is so much better than what we had even 5 years ago that, you don't have to spend $1 million to end up with a pretty incredible system.
That's true.
Well, Charlie, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. How can AVRant listeners get in touch with, if you're willing to let people get in touch directly with you, or at least look up SurgeX products and get more information about them? How can they find that?
Yeah, so first I would say is definitely look at our website, which is www.espsurgex.com, all one word. Or my email address is Charlie, CHARLIE .Jones, JONES, at Ametek, AMETEK.com. I may not be the right guy simply just because I handle commercial, but I would be more than happy to get you over to Jimmy Paschke, who heads up our residential side and sends his apologies for not being able to join us today, but he's on an airplane in between Hilton hotels because that's what we do.
All right. Well, it was really great talking with you, Charlie, and thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Not a problem. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'll work on see if I can get that Oppo online for the next time I'm on your show, and I'll let you know how it sounds.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Have a great day, Charlie.
You too. Bye-bye.
And that was Charlie Jones. I have to say, extremely excited about how well that interview went. I didn't know what to expect. I knew we were going to talk to somebody who's very technical, who had the background that we needed, but it's been very easy to sit down and talk to somebody who could give us the answers, but not in such an entertaining and informative way. So I really want to personally thank Charlie for taking the time out of his day to talk with us and being such a great guest.
Yeah, I was really happy to meet Charlie. Really impressed with his answers. We requested somebody who wasn't just going to talk in marketing terms, but was actually going to address the questions on a technical level. And yeah, I mean, he basically gave up most of his morning to do this interview with us, and so huge thanks to him. Big thanks to Peter as well from Caster Communications on the media side there for organizing this whole interview and everything like that. So yeah, big thanks to everyone. Big thanks to Charlie, and I'm really pleased with how that came out. I learned some stuff. I'm certain people listening to this will learn a few things along the way as well, and if nothing else, now they can check out some more information there over at SurgeX.
Right, and we will be doing another interview very soon with Brent Butterworth. If you're not familiar with who he is, welcome to the internet and all the AV websites, because Brent has been around for much longer than me and is still pumping out information on. I mean, where's he work? He's putting out stuff on a number of different websites. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm seeing him on Sound and Vision from time to time, Soundstage Network, particularly on the Wirecutter, which also works with Engadget. So he's I believe on his official Twitter account, he's putting up that he is a freelance home tech writer at the moment. But yes, still seeing his work. He's the former editor-in-chief of Home Theater Magazine, which is a magazine I used to subscribe to when it was still
there
around.
You go.
And I learned a lot from Brent, and I'm really happy to see that he is still very grounded, still interested in high-value, real performance, so I'm looking forward to speaking with him.
So look for that pretty soon, but in the meantime, if you have some questions about your home theater or how to expand it, what speakers to buy, how to set up your projector, how to calibrate your sound system, don't be afraid to give us an email at question@avrant.com. We'll be happy to help you out. You can find out all of our information at www.avrant.com, where just about anything you want to know about us is posted. So Thanks again to Charlie, and for AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.